Welcome everyone. I want to thank you all for coming today for this Lounge and Learn presentation on domain of one's own. I'm really excited that everybody came today to learn about this exciting tool that we can use in our teaching and in our personal portfolios and that kind of thing as well. We've got a great presentation today from the art department, a couple of professors, and I'm really excited that we have such a great representation of student voice. We have a student presenter and we have a fair number of students who are here as well. So thank you everyone for coming. Really appreciate you. And I'm just going to turn things over to our presenters and go ahead and get started. Thank you guys so much. Come on!
That was everything here, Katie.
Friday! Well, this is going to be an interactive presentation. Firstly, we'd like to say thank you for being here on a Friday, especially those of you who had a choice in the matter. I'm Katie Reese. I teach art and design here at St. Edward College. I'm delighted to be presenting with my colleagues and student, who I will let introduce themselves now.
I'm Shan Bryan Hansen. I'm the director of the art galleries and I teach painting, and I've used domain of one's own in my art 340 of 440 classes. This is right now the second semester I've used it. So
hi, I'm Katie Hopkins. I'm a junior and I'm a double major in English and art.
So we're gonna go through and talk a little bit about what domain of one's own is, how we used it specifically in our classes. We're also going to talk about digital identity and how we think about that as artists and individuals, how that looks for us, and then give some student examples of the work. You may have guessed this, but I'll just put this out there. We are not experts in web design or domain of one's own. So a big part of this for us has been kind of having beginner's mind and being learners ourselves. So we are here to share this work in hopes that it can help you and in hopes that you can help us make our work stronger. So we welcome your questions, your thoughtfully composed critical feedback, and we'll go from there. So how many people in this audience have never heard of domain of one's own? All right, that's pretty good. You guys are an educated audience. So Shannon has put together this beautiful slide with Autumn's website, and we have some of Autumn's language on there that I think one of the neat things about this is it being an initiative and not just sort of a single tool that we use in teaching. One of the things that I think Shannon and I were both excited about is this idea of giving students agency over their own work, their own data, their own content, as we like to say, their products, and to start shifting our students from people who only make work because we require them to people who make work and put it out there because that's what they're called to do.
I love Autumn's explanation here because I think I found domain of one's own to be a complicated thing to explain to someone. So when she writes that it's simple and complex all at the same time, I found that to be very true. I think it's commonly thought of as a portfolio, and while it can house a portfolio or portfolios in and of itself, it is not a portfolio. And it's also sometimes just thought of as a website, and it can be much more than that. Sunday Richard, when she was here last year and introduced it to my class, she explained a domain. I loved the metaphor she used. The domain is the land, and then you can build buildings on that land. And so that's been that has helped me understand it. So I have my land, and then maybe a few subdomains that are my different buildings. Some can be very personal, like a studio space, as a metaphor. Some more public, right, like a polished portfolio, a formal room kind of space.
And to continue kind of fruitful metaphors that we've been given, Autumn and Sunday and Daniel Lyons, who is also here, talked about the garden and the stream. And so I think with domain of one's own, it can be a little bit of both, but it's more the garden. So the garden is the static site that we tend, and it stays in the same place, and we can kind of know what to expect. This is a screenshot from my website, whoshareswins.com. It is hosted, is not through domain of one's own, but this is my garden. I make work, I put it up there, it pretty much stays the same. For me, the stream involves various social media. So I use Twitter, I use Instagram. I also have a blog that no one but my father reads. Bless him. Yeah. And Shan, bless her too. But you know, these are places where I think there's an expectation for constant output. These are also sites where there's back and forth. And so there's not back and forth on my website. It is strictly, for me, a portfolio site. And then these are the places where I feel the things that I put out drift down the stream. They interact with other things. They're more dynamic. And also a quick plug, currently I'm involved with a couple of students. We're doing something called Sketchuary on Instagram, where we post daily sketches under the hashtag Sketchuary. So if you'd like to join in that stream, we welcome you. There's only a couple more days of that.
I lasted about 5 days. And
Yeah,
I
me
know
too.
that stream.
I gave up.
But there's a lot of great stuff out there.
Yeah. I want to add also one thing I think about the stream, specifically these examples of Twitter and Instagram, is for me I go back and forth on like, I think I delude myself by saying that I'm using these professionally and productively when really I'm procrastinating and feeling bad about myself. Like,
Productive procrastination.
well, yeah. And I don't mean to be totally self-deprecating about that, but I think Instagram is full of beautiful images. We all put our best selves on Instagram and Facebook, and so it is a very quick step from I'm looking up images for visual research to I'm looking at my ex-boyfriend on his ski trip or what have you. And so I don't know how we navigate that professionally, and then maybe it's inappropriate to bring it up, but I wonder sometimes if when I'm using this stuff, it has a sense of productivity that I don't think is very actual or easily quantified.
Oh, this is my garden and stream. So this is a screenshot of my homepage of my website right now. I change it kind of quite a lot. And it's pretty simple, and it is definitely that professional space where I present my work. I rarely update my blog. It's really more like here's what's going on in my studio practice, exhibitions and that sort of thing. I always have goals to update it more regularly, but it's really a portfolio site for me, the website. And I will say, one of the reasons I was drawn to Domain of One's Own as a tool for art students is because it's really important that artists have professional websites. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important that they have professional websites that don't have ads on them, right? So it's easy to go set up a Wix or Weebly or a Squarespace site, but to get free of ads, you usually have to get past a paywall, right? So that's one thing I love about Domain of One's Own. Students are provided with ad-free domain space, which is much more professional when they start to use it in the professional world. So I just think it's a critical thing for an artist to have. And so then my stream is my only stream is my Instagram feed. I've tried other things, and artists really like Instagram. We're really visual people. But so for me, I was thinking about Instagram and how artists use it, and I think some artists present only really finished work, so it is like a very refined portfolio, and then others present works in progress. It's like an extension of the studio. And then others mix it all up, live studio. I think for me it's more an extension of the studio, and occasional other things mixed in there, but I'm a very private person by nature, so just diving into social media and thinking about how I wanted to use it was not a real easy thing. But yeah, no, I love Instagram, and it is a really good place for productive procrastination, but I will also say I think good opportunities come from it. I have found that it's very helpful for others to see like that I have an active studio practice happening, and I've had opportunities come as a result of that. So I think the stream is valuable too.
I think I want to add also with the Instagram stream, especially for young artists and designers, I think it's important to think about these projects, the garden or the stream, in the context of your digital identity. And if you don't already know, I'm probably not the first to tell you that every future employer is going to Google you. And whatever you have out there is part of how you're presenting to these people and others. And so if you aspire to be a young designer, that should be sort of the direction in which your stream is headed. Mm-hmm. And so you can see here from Shan has Michelle Obama's official portrait.
I love it. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Thumbs up, great
and even a
portrait.
consistent color palette there. So it's not all strictly professional work, but she's, it's not her in red Solo cups or maybe her meals. And that could be fine if that's part of the persona, but I think to start thinking about how you are curating the image that you put forward is an important step towards professionalism. And like, if you haven't done it already, pull up a private browser and Google yourself. How many other people share your name? What kind of media are they putting out there? Are you at the top of the rankings? Is it, which pictures of you? That sort of stuff.
I also I get a lot of questions about my process, so I use this as a place to really just share, here's how it's done, and so if someone's interested, they can see that on Instagram. Oh, this is so I have a subdomain, and this is my teaching blog. It's also, in both cases, I use WordPress to create the blogs, and so for me, a lot of this is also about the teaching blog, especially. I started it when I started Domain of One's Own with students as a means of modeling, all right, what I'm asking them to do. Like, I'm willing to do this. I don't want to ask students to do something that I myself am not willing to do. So there's a little bit of teaching in the open if I'm asking them to put work in the open. This has, for me, replaced Moodle. I love that I have agency over it, right? I am responsible for not losing the content, but I'm also able to hold on to it. I know where it's at. I can easily cut and paste when I need to. For instance, I took this before. You see that the first post says spring 18th, so that's an assignment I've done twice now, so I just pretty much copied most of the content, bumped it up, and then added spring 18. And then, we can't see it here, but below is the categories. In the sidebar, I have categories, and that's how I sort out classes. So I'll have a category for $3.40, a category for $4.99, and students can just hit the category to see all the content for their course. So I really like it. I think it's really easy to use, and but I am then responsible for backing up my content and holding on to it. So that's.
On the subject of content, we're doing Domain of One's Own through Reclaim Hosting, which is a company that handles the domain names, the URL, as well as the server space. And so Shan mentioned Wix, Weebly, Squarespace. These are all very functional sites, especially for artists. But once you've put your data or your content into, for example, Wix, and you decide to switch it over, it's not easy to port that data. And further, you may have entered into certain contracts vis-a-vis how it's shared and their kind of stake in it. So a neat thing about Reclaim Hosting is that they are fully behind giving students and web users agency and making it easy for us to reclaim our data and our kind of digital identity in that way.
I had a Squarespace website for a long time, and if you're familiar with, I love the look of Squarespace websites. They're visually very beautiful. But when I broke up with Squarespace, I had a tough time getting out of there. I don't have access to copy the code with Squarespace. I actually stopped and closed my account a year ago, and my credit card was charged this January.
Oh, no.
So I just really, it did kind of affirm for me that I really do like the open source aspect of WordPress. So anyway, that was one of the reasons that I switched.
And I have yet to break up with Cargo Collective, Kuboswine, because we're too deep in, even though it's abusive.
Yeah.
We have such a history. Sorry, I'm making it imperfect. Well, let's go to the next slide. So here's Daniel Lyons, who again came to talk to my intermediate printmaking class about this. And I think I wanted to show Daniel because I think, as I mentioned, Shannon and I are not experts in web design. And so another thing, pedagogically, it's very helpful to bring someone else in. I think it's always good to expose our students to other people. They seem relieved not to hear from me for a day. And Daniel can talk about his expertise, in this case, digital identity. He told funny stories about the other Daniel Lyons who was out there, who was a convicted criminal, and what he had to do to sort of change the algorithms and ranking. So I think I see a couple of faculty members here, if you're interested in Domain of One's Own, you don't have to learn WordPress by yourself. You don't have to go it alone. We have these great resources in Autumn and ITS, so it's kind of exciting and a collaborative process. And as Shan mentioned, it's an opportunity to sort of model to our students that we are learning too. And like, we are trying to start down this journey of kind of claiming our digital identity and creating sustainable web presences.
I think all of us, Brian, Katie, and I have had Autumn, Sunday, or Daniel come to our class to help introduce this because of their depth of knowledge and expertise, and it's really helped. I think it really helped create a successful start to the project.
So these are some of the institutions who are currently participating in Domain of One's Own, and maybe you've heard of some of them. I think it's exciting as something that is on the forefront of kind of open pedagogy. And as mentioned, it sort of shifts the focus from I'm a student creating content because it is required of me to I am a young peer contributing to the stream of professionals. And certainly with Domain of One's Own specifically, we're entering into a circle of peership with these institutions. So we were aware of this. We applied for a mini grant, a little pilot project to try it with intermediate printmaking, intermediate advanced painting, and then web design with Brian Pierman. Let's see. Shannon had great success with it. I feel like I was not as successful in it, in part because I did Domain of One's Own the same time that I first added a community engaged component. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to do what Shan did, not what I did. Do you want to add to this?
Nope, I think that's great.
Okay.
So the next slide shows a little bit of the back end. So when you go into Reclaim, you get your code, you go into, and we all had, in my class, I had students bring their computers to class the day that Autumn visited, and we were in the critique studio, so there was a lecture piece of it, and then we were working piece of it. So students were, we got our domains, and we actually started the WordPress sites that day, right?
Yeah, we WordPress and started to actually do some building that day.
Yes, so Autumn was extremely helpful with all of the technical stuff as well as a great explanation of Domain of One's Own. And so I included this slide because when you go into the cPanel, I use WordPress, the one up in the corner there, that is it. But if I were more techie and maybe had a little bit more time, there are all these other things. If we could scroll down, this is a screenshot, we would see a lot of other things, a lot of apps. You can upload apps, right, to cPanel. So it's not just about websites, right, that's kind of the primary use, but there are a lot of other possibilities out there. I just don't know what they are, but I'm confident that students will find them and put them to good use.
So these are two screenshots from our two websites, just examples of the kind of content we were asking students to post. My course, as I mentioned, was a community engaged printmaking course, and so we were thinking about what it means to be an artist in society and how our art can serve different populations. And so there's, I think, Sam's response to what is the artist's role in society? And so we were kind of in the same way that we might have previously posted these to a class blog, to Slack, or to Moodle. Instead, we post them straight to the website and comment there.
Yeah, I'm going to back up one. We didn't talk about domain names, so that's this huge thing we do on day one.
Yeah.
Students have to think of their domain names. So I think we all kind of, when we first day of class said this is coming, and I know I said make a list of maybe 5 domains because you don't know if the name you want is going to be out there. I personally feel strongly that if available, it's not a bad idea for an artist to have their name as their domain name for professional reasons. However, Domain of One's Own is Domain of One's Own, so I have to let go of that, right? And that's a little bit of a tough piece, but I think it's an important part of the concept of Domain of One's Own. So some students choose to use their name for their domain name. Others can't because their domain.
I was going to say sometimes they're taken.
It's already been purchased. But we definitely spent some time discussing the nuances of domain names, and Autumn was very helpful with that as well. And for my class, so one thing this coincided with our 300 level studio classes, 3 of them becoming upper advanced cores with writing components. So this was a great space to let some of that happen. So for me, 6 blog posts were part of the writing piece of the course. The students had to, and now in my current class, they write a blog post for each painting project, and it's due at the end of the day, the painting is due. So that's what Nikki's doing here. And for form, they can you know, explore, in terms of what they're writing about, they can explore the concept, they can show us process, which many students choose to do. Katie Hopkins has a great format that she used, which she'll show us. So everybody did things a little bit differently, but it was a great space for writing as well as a lot of photographs. Great place to share process photographs.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that I think Shan had greater success with this, and I think one of the reasons is the kind of scaffolding she provided to the writing assignment. A particular challenge for us in teaching upper level courses in studio art is that upper level core courses require 3,000 words of polished writing. And we are typically focused on teaching studio techniques, not at the expense of writing, but that's our wheelhouse, and so it ends up being a lot of content to cover, and sometimes I think in my course at least, we didn't necessarily take the time that we could have or should have to refine the writing, to kind of push it, to situate it in a more helpful context. So that's something that I am working on as this class goes forward. These are examples of student sites. Two screenshots here, Sam Police on the top and Taylor Beasy on the bottom. I think Shannon and I both think Sam's image is really funny.
That's what it's like, let's show them how.
Yeah, so we'll...
You guys see it in action.
So I think I have to come over here.
Yeah, just up to the left, yeah.
Click on you. There we go. It's funny because... And I think also Autumn and Sunday and Daniel will say, probably in different language, but we need to stop using the term digital natives because it sort of implies this like children come out of the womb and they swipe left and their website pops up because they were born in 2000 whatever. Obviously that's a great oversimplification and ignores the idea of digital literacy and sort of having a sense of one's digital identity. But I do think that we are of a generation currently, or we're seeing a generation of young people who have a greater familiarity and fluidity and fluency with F-words, images, a proliferation of images of yourself, and having a more astute sense of how those images speak and in what context. And I think this image from Sam is a great example of that. Should we go back to some of the other, let's see.
So Sam is a student who started the project in Katie's printmaking class, and he's now in my painting class, and so he's one of the few who is now in his like second semester of Domain of One's Own.
Are there any others you want to look at in particular?
Let's look at Ashling's.
Ashling.
And then I think Taylor's is a nice example of
Okay.
professional use. So Ashling's, I think, she's really declaring some identity, here. And this is one of her photographs behind the text. And so she's just gotten started with this and is already truly thinking about how she wants to use this space. So hers.
We've got about, home, and
Let's see if she has anything in her. No. If you go to probably the home page, that's where she's putting her blog post. Should be. Well.
There's a blog under this, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Ta-da! So one thing when I give an assignment, they're required to submit these blog posts, but I don't, the way I kind of manage where they're at is I ask them to link to their post underneath the assignment post on my teaching blog. And so that way I can just click on the link right below the assignment and get to all of their blogs. Otherwise it might be tricky to find the posts sometimes. Yeah, so these are hers.
And even things like the short bio that is both intimate, authentic, but also professional. I think that just having that as a thing, kind of an artifact that we are producing as artists. The artist statement is something that we deal with a lot. We all struggle with it, but you need to be able to crank one out. And so those things become the content that shows up, in our case, in Domain of One's Own.
Yeah, so these websites have provided a really good space for us to add the writing content in a way that really will serve them as artists, right? This is how they'll write professionally sometimes, right, on their website. Their artist, SK's an artist statement bio. Maybe Taylor's as an example of should let Katie.
So Taylor BC is a great example. Taylor BC is her name, but she chose Tazine. And I think that actually has good cadence and is very memorable and kind of pithy. And she is a graphic design, she's an art major graphic design track, and so up here she's got a nice sample of her work.
It's a poster she's done for theater.
Let's look at her print. Let's look at something else.
Those could be well, but this is how my website looks in a few places too.
Well, I think this is the other thing too. It's easy to put this up. It's kind of like, it's easy to install a raised bed, but tending the damn thing in July is like, that's where the rub is. And so kind of deciding like how much appetite do you have for maintaining even the static garden as opposed to the stream.
Yeah.
Good, she's got a bio. Let's go back to our talk. Any more you want to look at?
I think that's good.
Okay.
I'll let Katie.
Now we're going to turn it over to Katie Hopkins.
I'm going to come back here so I can see it. Big
Okay.
screen.
Well, hi, I'm Katie, like I said. And so I'm just gonna navigate to my website first. Where am I gonna
You have to
There we
click
go.
on the thing.
Maybe. All right. Yeah. So here's my website. So I was in Shan's inaugural class of Domain of One Zone, and I was really excited for it right away. As I said, I'm a double major in art and English, so an intermediate painting class with a writing requirement was like right up my alley. And not only that, but I'm someone who I have high academic goals, but I also have a high amount of personal goals. And the problem with that can be you can't always work on both at once because then you don't have time for anything else. So Domain of One Zone has really been able to help me intersect those goals. I knew I wanted a website to house my art, to house my writing, but how do you find time with that if it's not part of a class assignment? And so, as Katie and Shan know, I am a student who, whenever I can intersect class assignments and personal goals, it happens, and I do it all the time. Maybe to their annoyance, but maybe not.
No, to our great delight.
So this is my website. I'm just gonna.
I'll just pop in and say Katie's photos led me to a purchase of an iPhone 7 before I really needed
I did. I sold her
it.
an iPhone
So
7.
impressive.
Yeah, I took all those photos with my iPhone because it's all about me. So this is my website. Right away on the top, I say story artist, designer, writer because that's who I want to be and also who I identify as now. And I really built my site around that idea. It's not separated into here's my art, here's my writing, but like on the home page, you get the art with the writing right away in that slider. You can scroll down. I have some featured pages and I really like interactive websites when things just like interact with the mouse. And then I have my blog post down here that will show up. As I do them.
You using a WordPress template?
Yes, this is a WordPress template. And this is actually my second iteration of my website. It didn't look like this when I was in class with Shan. It was a little more static. And another great thing about Domain of One Zone is that I felt like it pushed me to explore other people's websites, not just in class, but like looking at examples like, what are my favorite artists? What is their web presence like? What don't I want to do? Things like that. Because I think just as good examples are of websites, I think bad examples of websites are that much more able to help you learn what you don't want to do. So Shan had mentioned my kind of template for blogs that I did before. There we go. Is it loading? There we go. I had to click right on the word. What I do, I always start out, so this was for her class, I always start out with a large photo of the piece that I made. And then I start with the at a glance section, and I give a little bit of just physical info about the piece. I have the title, the medium, and something that I like to do is I like to say what I was listening to when I was creating this piece, because I think it's fun to get an insight into the artist's mind. It's something that an artist, like a couple other artists that I know and like, do that. And then I go with the concept. What was the assignment, but then what did I set out? Like, how did I set out wanting to create this? And I write a little bit about that. sometimes a lot. And oh, this one, I went just with the concept actually, but if we go to another one, and I have categories and archives on the side, and those are always in the footer as well, so people can find those easily. Let's do Space Dog, just because I like that painting. So I have the process, the concept and then the process, and I talk about the process. Sometimes I'll add in-process photos, because I think that's another interesting, I think people can look at art and it gets really intimidating, or like you don't get how much work went into it, and if you show those in-process things, that your website can be a really personal way to like have an insight to yourself but to other people. And then so in the process section I talk about how I made it, what were troubles I ran into, how did I think it was received, what did it accomplish, and all of that. Interesting note on my domain name. So my domain name is thekatiehopkins.com, which if you don't know me, sounds a little pretentious, but when Katie was saying, you know, Google yourself, like people are going to Google you, if you Google Katie Hopkins, you don't get me, you get the scary British lady. And so
She's a politician, right?
She's a politician. I would have just gone with Katie Hopkins, but both Katie Hopkins and Catherine Hopkins were taken by the same person, and they were parents who bought it for their child born in like 2001.
Yeah.
Which I know that only because they said it like right on there on the website. So I'm like, so it was kind of a fun way to poke at that, and I enjoy it. I embrace it. I also made that my Instagram handle, and I accidentally double clicking, and so I can link right to my account. There's some Sketchuary stuff, some St. Norbert prints, The Office, Stranger Things, because who doesn't like Stranger Things? But yeah, so I'm really happy with my whole experience with Domain of One's Own as a whole, and I think it's not just benefiting me now at school. It's not just an assignment that I'm going to forget about. It helped me build my own space, that I have a resume on here, I have a portfolio on here, and it's going to live long past my time just at St. Norbert.
I'm going to add to that. I mentioned that we got these domains available to students through a mini grant, I think through the DLI. So anyway, we received money through the college, so every student received a domain for free for a year. And after that year, it was up to them to renew it unless they were in another class. So there are some domains that just, they were made, they were perhaps populated, and then they're gone. But the flip side of that is that once the coursework is done, or once students graduate, it is entirely theirs to take with them. So I think that's another nice thing, that you're building this thing all through college, and then it goes with you out into the professional world, rather than like, oh, that was college, now I have to start over.
And it's really affordable too.
Yeah,
like,
it is.
I renewed it last spring, or maybe it was this spring, I don't remember when exactly, but I felt very powerful. I was like, I own this is my space. So yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, let's see, I think we have one or two more slides. Pardon us as we handle the double screen for a moment longer. So as we mentioned at the start, we are presenting this in hopes that it might serve you and your work, and also in hopes that you can help us in many different ways. So just some notes of issues and then things that went well. I think anytime you give a PowerPoint presentation, it's not right to put bulleted things on the screen and then just read them to the audience, because you are already reading them. So this image is also one of my drawings. It's costumes no one needs. In the spirit of things. So I think we covered most of these, but I just wanted to put them up there and open the floor to questions about this project. Or others. We're open. Amy.
So every time I do a digital project in class, and I only do the one, I do digital mapping in my slave narratives class, just seems like every iteration of it, I run into some tech problem that I didn't see coming.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like this last time we went and did census data in the library, and all the websites worked exactly the way they usually do, but suddenly the printers, like no printers worked, and it like blew my assignment up in class. So I'm wondering what kind of tech issues do you face? And is this one of those like programs or websites, or I'm not sure my vocab is right, but is it gonna be like changing, like, you know, like your phone updates and suddenly everything's like different?
Sure.
Like, is that an issue, and is there a way to stay on top of it as an instructor?
I think that's always an issue with any kind of new media. I think
Yeah.
also in art, I like to tell people that it's not a demo if something doesn't go wrong. Because but
That's good.
yeah, it is frustrating when you're trying to do something that's new for you.
Yeah.
And then it's like, but WordPress is a really stable, long-standing program that has a lot of support behind it.
Oh, good.
So there are constant updates, but they are, they're pretty robust in that way. And I guess one of the issues with the templates is you can get a template designed by, you know, a very young designer or whomever,
Yeah.
and it may look great, but then WordPress updates and your links break, or you try and modify it and it breaks. So I would say within the WordPress templates, it's important to do a little due diligence on who gives you your template or where that comes from, because there are some that are more robust and better tested. But also it's definitely something where I test it before class, you know, and kind of do a dry run and sometimes curse a little in class, sometimes a lot. Autumn,
Can I
you wanna-
follow up?
Yeah,
on
please.
that just a
Yeah,
little
you-
bit?
You have
So-
technical issues.
Yeah.
One thing that I do want to put a plug in for is our tech bar, which there's a lot of the students who are here right now are students who are part of our tech bar consultant group that we have. If you're not familiar with the tech bar, it is sort of, we're thinking about it in terms of the writing center for technology. So you think about a lot of times you go for technology help, and it's a very transactional kind of experience that you have. I'm having problems with my password. I can't get connected to the internet, and you come in and we kind of fix that for you. But a lot of times we are talking about digital literacies that we're going to have to build over time, and so our tech bar consultants are a great way if you're a faculty member who's thinking about implementing this project or really any project into your class. You can partner with us. We can work with the tech bar consultants to make sure they're up to speed with that technology. And then you can send your students to us, just like you would send your students to the Writing Center if they needed help with writing. So, Katie and Shan talked about how, I could come into your class and talk to your students. Same thing about Taylor or Ben, we love coming to your classes and talking about that kind of stuff. But if you want to provide help for your students outside of class, right, what do they do when they're working on something and they run into these kind of problems? I think this is a really innovative approach. And a lot of the students who are here right now are students who are our tech bar consultants, so feel free in the lounge portion to, talk to them.
And I would say the tech problems I ran into were pretty small and very solvable. So one big one, the first in Katie's class, is a number of students, their confirmation emails went into their spam folders and they didn't get them, and it was somewhat complicated. I think some calls were made to Reclaim Hosting to undo that. But otherwise, with WordPress, something can be really simple or really complex. Like large companies use WordPress, but I use WordPress, and my website is very simple. So, I think we can tell students too, like, I can help you to a point, but there is a point when, like Katie said, we approach this with a beginner's mind. I was truly one step maybe ahead or learning with them, problem solving together when we did this the first time. And, WordPress is like all the themes that are out there, you can find all sorts of things on YouTube or videos on the theme site. There's just a lot of information out there to help problem solve with WordPress. I think, as Katie mentioned, it's a really stable site. But you do have to update. Like, updates will come up in your WordPress dashboard, but it's easy. It's like updating an app on your phone.
Okay, good question in the back. Sir? Yes?
Oh, me?
Yes, you.
So mine isn't a technical question, it's more of a, I guess the question by way of a story, and then maybe that will make sense.
I'm ready.
So only this morning in my behavior class, was assigning a research project. They get to kind of choose what they would like to research in this behavior class. Now, I thought this would be a great idea, given the freedom that they would have to do to whatever project they would like to within the realm of behavior. Great. I realized very quickly that through the questions that the students have, that they're not as excited with that freedom as I might be. So a lot of the questions would circle around, well, will you be giving us a list of the topics we can choose from? Like, no, not really. This is your project. I want it to be your thing. My guess is you guys must have crazy engagement numbers from students who are, you know, it sounds like very into this process, and the ownership might be key. I guess I'm curious if I don't know if that's true, I'm assuming it is. Do you guys run into any problems where folks don't like so much ownership or struggle with the you know what I'm trying to say, the kind of the freedom with which they're given type of thing? Because
Paradox of choice.
I run into that in my class.
I think that this is, to jump in and answer your question, I think there's not actually that much freedom. We're sort of saying you're going to use this for our class. You're going to be writing these blog posts, you're going to be posting work about the stuff we're doing in class, and so that's somewhat limited. I think we definitely have students who post the post, and that's it, and then they let it lapse. And so I think I like the idea of great engagement numbers. I'm not sure that this is as well received for our students as it was for us.
I guess that's what I was
There's the
curious about.
range.
It sounds like that it would be, at least.
I think for people who are already thinking of themselves as young professionals and artists and who already have kind of a comfort with the idea of putting themselves out there, this is exciting and empowering. And for people who are maybe not yet there or not confident in their work, this is a little cumbersome.
Do you guys have any pro tips on how you navigate that?
Well, one of the things I'm doing differently this year is I didn't give everyone a website. I now have a subdomain like Shan. So a subdomain, I have katiereese.com. I now have art330.katiereese.com. And so we're just doing through that one site. And so it's not so much about everyone's digital identity as it is about we're making content with an outward focus. I say we're making content with an outward focus. It is public. I don't know how much traffic we're going to get. We'll see. But so I think for me, reining it in and making it more about the writing and less about the digital identity, just because we're doing so many other things with the class, that's sort of how I'm handling that this semester.
I would say two things. One, definitely some students are more engaged, like Katie, and others, some are kind of into it, and then others not so much at all. For what I feel that we are giving them, even those students who aren't engaged right now, is they're going to graduate and they're going to need a website as a designer or an artist, and they'll come back to these skills. I'm quite confident about that. But I think also keeping it simple, right? Yes, so they're required to put up a site as part of their domain for my class. They're required to do the blog post, but whatever else they do with it is up to them. So there's that freedom, but I only assess the blog post. And then, I only assess the blog post and completely lost my thought. I'm sorry.
Well, but I think what you're getting is this, it's more narrow in scope than it
Yeah.
seems.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm sorry.
So the one area where students, artists are really visual people, so choosing a theme, the way it looks, we can go down that rabbit hole and never leave it. So Autumn, that was one of the kind of choice things I ran into. So Autumn had a good solution. She said, well, why don't we just stick with this one theme when we're setting up the sites, and then at a later time students can go and kind of choose their theme on their own time. And that was very helpful because we all got our sites up more quickly, kind of sticking to let's just stick with this theme and then go in, and there's so many themes. And
I feel like when you're choosing, as an
Yeah.
artist choosing a theme, it's like, it's not just choosing a look, it's choosing who you are.
yes, the anxiety of choice comes up for us there for sure. So the Autumn solution was really good. Let's just start with one, branch out from there.
And I'll just add that in projects that I've seen and projects that I've run myself, you definitely have that paradox of choice, or that, oh God, well, there's just so many things, like what am I gonna do here? If you're making it about a topic, if it fits into your course, if it fits into your discipline, where you can make it so that the student can make the site about themselves, right? They know themselves pretty well already, right? They everybody kind of likes to talk about themselves, talk about their interests. So if you can fit that into your class and make it about identity, if you can tie it to identity in some way, that is a way that it makes it easier for them to connect with it. But that doesn't necessarily work with every discipline. So
I also think it's important, like in Shane's class, we had like a really large community emphasis where we were like encouraged to look at each other's websites, and I think that sparked a lot of interest. Like we got to see, oh, how did you do that on your website? Like, can you show me how?
Yeah.
And I think that was really exciting. So that helped engage as well.
You're also seeding an institutional process. So for the faculty members in here, Jeff mentioned at our last faculty meeting that the full spectrum pedagogy piece of the strategic planning got more money. Well, part of what our money is for is a site license for reclaimed hosting, so that starting in the next fiscal year, we will be funding a site for every human being on this campus who wants a site. Not perpetually, but again,
Staff
that's
included?
starting out, everyone.
Cool.
It's an unlimited, so we're paying the money up front, unlimited amount of sites for that amount of money. That's part of seeding this process. So our goal would be then to create an institutional culture where this becomes part of what students do. And it's always going to be the case where some students are going to navigate to it and some students are not. That's always going to be true. But if we situate it, you know, as a faculty member, well, they've got a domain, they can do this. We can plug into courses in various places, right? So they can get in and do various things. We're going to tie it originally to looking at digital competencies, digital citizenship, but the reality is that they're sort of seeding this project for us, and by getting out there and doing it, right? And it fits your profession very well. But I think the key, again, circling back, is to identity and ownership, right? That too often in college, professors are doing things to students, right? We're giving them the information. We're telling them, you gotta do this, you gotta do X, you gotta do Y, you gotta do Z. And some of those pieces will end up in this place. But the idea is to focus on student learning and that ownership of that learning. Because ultimately, we want them to walk out of here as learners.
With a website.
With a website, and being able to say, regardless whether they're an artist or whether they're in business, it doesn't matter. They still have to represent themselves. And for almost every single student on this campus, they have a digital presence, but it's fragmented. It's scattered, right? It's, I'm on this, I did this, I do this. And it's not, this allows you to bring that presence together. So just in taking the things that you're already doing, not for classes necessarily, but just in your life where you've done digital work or you're involved in a media, then you pull that all together into one place and say, this is what I'm about. So I think that has a lot of potential, and that's what we've seen in talking to other institutions. So you had that list of all those institutions up there. We were on a webinar with a bunch of other liberal arts colleges talking about this kind of process, and it was people at Williams, it was people at Smith, it was people at Bryn Mawr, it was people at Davidson. These are elite liberal arts colleges that were talking about the same idea of student ownership.
And that brings me to something that I don't think we've discussed a whole lot. I feel like St. Norbert College is doing a lot of things really great, and sorry, students, this is maybe not your concerns, but in terms of higher ed and the kind of competitive market of colleges, I think domain of one's own is something that could, in certain areas, distinguish us from our peers or be kind of a competitive advantage. And I don't mean to couch this interesting thing in the context of like how we get ahead, but it's
well, we
neat.
do have to continue to exist, right?
Sure. So yeah, again, like it enriches our students, it serves our teaching. It's like an exciting project that fits in with our mission and pedagogy. We have amazing people like Autumn who can support it. Reclaim Hosting is a really neat company in terms of what they're trying to do. I just feel like, yeah, I'm gonna get off the soapbox. Are there any other questions about this project before we turn up the lights and eat some little piece of fruit wrapped in prosciutto?
Other
question.
Tech Bar people, are you excited about this? Are you all working on your sites? Do you have any insights, any questions?
Well, we're working on our site, and my first advice is that like it can get really frustrated when you first started. You know, with like your new team, with your new setting and everything, it can get you like a few days. But if you're patient enough to like, you know, start to learn to love it, you will get into it and be able to, you know, work it.
That's good for
Yeah,
us to remember.
great. There's an initial learning curve that's kind of intense, but once you hurdle it, yeah, there's tons you can do.
And I think part of that, like that initial learning curve, that's part of the benefit, right? Again, you talked about they're going to leave with skills. The second time you make a website, you'll know some things.
Yeah. Lori, did you have a question? or
Yeah, I
comment?
actually have a reclaim hosting site of my own. I have a domain of my own.
Ooh.
And I always forget to go there. And I need to do things in I need to do things with other people.
Yeah.
And I sort of get excited when I'm like looking at other people's sites and
Yeah.
I've gotten into my own little head. So I was wondering if it's not really a tech bar thing. It's more like, can there be a little support group, or can there be like a happening where we could get together? I don't care who you
I would
are.
love that.
So
Let's do
I
that.
can just anywhere look at my site and go, boy, that's so boring. Let's take another picture of you. Your
Yeah.
selfie sucks.
So
Let's
that's
do it. You
that's
know, or-
that's an idea I've been kicking around, and I don't know what to call it yet. But I'm looking at trying to put at least a monthly thing
Yeah.
where it's not so much a place where you go for like support, but a place where everyone's just around you building websites.
Yeah.
And
Like
we'll
designated
post.
time to work on it.
Yeah, because I also need an excuse to work on my website, and I never like set aside time to do it.
Yeah.
And I think it's really exciting and energizing to be around people who are also doing that. And maybe support can be part of it. We could probably integrate the tech bar, so you've got some people who are maybe a couple steps ahead of you. But I think the bigger thing is just seeing people doing this, and it could be students, faculty, staff, maybe alumni even.
That's
Move it.
that idea that I love so much is integrating the community into that, right? And just getting maybe alumni or other people who are.
So stay tuned.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the kind of accountability of meeting regularly is
Yeah.
we all need it.
Well, that's the whole thing. It's like
Great
school is
idea.
like having massive training wheels. You know, you have assignments and deadlines and people, you know, like partitioning your day into little chunks that are digestible, and then you go off into the world and
You just
know?
fall over all the time.
you can. I mean, it's like, what am I supposed to be doing right now? I always have this feeling like I'm forgetting to do something really important.
Yeah. And if you have a
Need
reason
that.
professionally that you're getting on Instagram, but then you're existing in this state of like, what am I supposed? Then you're off the rails. As am I. Cheyenne?
I just love that idea because of the collective knowledge that would be in the room, right? We could really help each other problem solve.
Right. Well, I was
Totally.
thinking.
Yeah.
I was looking at your websites, and I was like, oh, mine is so boring. I want the things that I don't know how to do. That like, you know.
It's a template. It's a template. Yeah.
Still, I don't even
Yeah.
know where that template exists.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and there are designers whose whole job is just WordPress templates and assisting people with that. And again, well, yeah, what?
I said respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other questions? More tech bar thoughts? Thank you for coming.
So how long did, I have a question for the tech bar. So, you know, your learning curve, like when did it take you weeks to break through that? Days?
So we started with a thing called just like WordPress.com, and then we create our own site on WordPress, and that took me a couple days to get used to it. Just like because I always have this notion in my head that I want my website to look in a certain way. I want it to be perfect. I want this button to like blink and that button to be that way, you know. And because we very like template oriented, so it's hard to actually make it your way unless you write your own code, right? So like for WordPress, it took me a couple days, but for the domain, it take more responsibility and it take more like customization. So it took me about a week to get used to it, but it wasn't that bad. Like once you get used to the team and then you understand one part is that you just have to do everything. And then Google is really helpful, and
Isn't it?
YouTube and everything. Yeah, there's like a 2-hour YouTube video on how to customize my team. So it was like, yeah, I watched the 2 hours YouTube video and get to know everything about it.
What's your theme?
It's called Sydney. So it is used for mostly small businesses, but it's a very beautiful team, and there's like a slider photos, like it changes the photo every time, so it's really beautiful.
And our tech bar students just got their domains like two
weeks
weeks
ago.
ago.
2 weeks
So
ago.
they're
Sounds like a
they're
pro.
very early in the process.
Yeah, like I had just basically started and like, don't be afraid that you don't know what you're doing, because like I really still don't know like what I'm doing, but
You're
it's
sitting.
really like
Mhm.
all part of like the process is like I sat down and talked to Taylor and I totally just blanked their name, that was so bad. Just about like what do I want to even put on my domain and like what do I want to talk about, and so we were like, I only have one small idea, is like I want to talk about like my education experiences while being at this college, like why did I want to go into education, like what, like talk about like my sophomore block experiences, like everything like surrounding that. So that's just like one part though, and like I'm still trying to figure out what else I want to talk about, but like I guess like you have people around you to help you like brainstorm and like figure everything out, and like I guess don't be afraid, just take everything like one bit at a time.
Also, if you want to just come into the tech bar and just work on your website, please do.
And I really do
Yeah.
feel like we really are building that sense of community just in the couple of weeks that we've been doing this. And to Lori's point, you kind of need that. You kind of need to be looking at each other's sites, having other people read your site, and reading other people's site, looking at their sites to see what you like and what you don't like can be just as powerful, to Katie's point.
Yeah.
So
If
yeah.
they're sitting right next to you, then you don't want to say, oh, your site.
There's that.
I think part of being at a college is this identity thing, right? That
Yeah.
you're making choices about who you want to be in terms of the role that you're in. You're going to be an educator, so that's your role. You're going to be an artist, that's your role, or a writer. That's part of what college is, right? So every person who's a student at this college is trying to navigate that process, right? So to have a place where you're forced to say, because eventually you're going to have to go out and look for a job, right?
Yeah.
So you're forced to say, well, why me? I mean, why would they hire me? Why would they hire somebody else? Who am I? What do I represent as an individual? And I'm just a real strong believer in, if you tell the stories about the rich experiences you had here, that's going to be a difference maker. It really, regardless of where you are, regardless of what your major is, it's going to be a difference maker for you, because you're going to tell a St. Norbert story of what your experience was here, and that's going to be something that everybody else can't tell. That's going to be a different story, and I think that's going to be powerful.
Oh, that wasn't my hand, sorry.
That'll teach you to stretch.
Well, and one of the things that I love about this project too is that the whole time that you're doing that and grappling with those big questions about identity and how you represent yourself to the world, you're also building really basic foundational digital literacies that are transferable to lots of other places, right? And so, Sheann talked about, well, if a student doesn't, carry their domain off into the next semester or to the next year or after graduation, I never use that as a benchmark for success, right? Because what they really own at the end of the day isn't the domain, it isn't the degree, it's the learning. Right, and owning the learning and being able to transfer the stuff that you learned to build another site at another time for another purpose. Nobody can ever take that from you,
And WordPress skills are a good thing to have on a resume.
right?
Yeah, that's a
I've
handout.
actually applied for 14 resumes, and I'm a comm major and a business minor, and domain and like website skills are like something they require or look for. So like
Yeah.
I've noticed that that's like a really popular thing now with like, web design.
And if you can show them your site,
Yeah.
right, and you've vetted it at the tech bar, and it looks good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just want to add one thing is that as a student at St. Norbert, we have so many different activities that we do. We even have required to take like 12 classes now in our own discipline. So you do a lot of things in those classes. Sometimes it's very visual, like art, and sometimes it's like something outside there, like photography. And a resume won't be able to translate all the skills that you learn and all of your product from the school. So having a website, you can put all of the things that you've been your master's on there and the experience on there as well. And I think it's also different from LinkedIn because like if you want to market yourself, you don't want them to search on LinkedIn and find other people who have your same skills. So like if they just go on my website and it's about me, then okay, yeah, you saw everything about me instead of like go just like browsing on other people who would have the same name or the same skills that I do.
So I Googled myself recently.
Let's Google you.
Yeah.
So you will not find the guy that's sitting here, but if you Google Jamie O'Brien, you get world champion surfer.
I didn't know that about
He's
you.
awesome. I mean, in a lot of ways, there's lots of about this.
So your search has got me.
I'm okay with that being. I'm
Look
okay
at
with
you.
that.
Let's try.
That is completely fine with me.
Wait, how?
I think we might have gone.
Yeah.
He's built up a
But
pretty
this
good
this is what used to be up there.
Killer of St.
He
Peter
murdered someone.
Fisherman.
So Daniel
Wow.
Lyons had to work real hard to get this up here.
Is it that first guy with the mug shot right there?
I think so.
Yeah.
This is where we cut off the recording.
Well, are there any other questions? I feel like we can continue this conversation perhaps off video record and around small snacks.
We can edit this. It's fine.
Can you edit out all the times I said inappropriate?
So were you gonna add to after you Googled yourself or just
No.
like, yeah?
That
just
would be another thing.